Shana Tova, everybody. Okay.
Use the sponsors.
Okay. Today's classes are sponsored for the marriage of Ilana Bat Ephraim Mordechai with David ben Lucia, the Refuah Shalema and the Hatzlacha of Shia ben Sarah Perel, and Li'ilui Nishmat Benyamin ben Lev and Miriam bat Chanoch. Okay, we are in Tafshin Pei Dalet. Welcome. Okay, so we're in the Alsheich HaKadosh on a complicated piece that we've been doing for a while about the nature of the words Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chayim that God breathed into him, meaning Adam, a living soul. And we mentioned the midrash that talks about how God stood the golem of Adam up from the earth to the rakia, and he threw the neshama into him. And we asked a whole bunch of questions, and the first thing that we resolved was seemingly a contradiction in how we can be connected and disconnected from the Shekhinah at the same time. Okay. Klal Hadvarim, in my Alsheich, it's on page 28, the second to last paragraph. Klal Hadvarim, ki bevo nefesh po, odena kshura bo yitbarach ad ha'avota. So, the rule of the matter is that when the nefesh comes here into this world, it is still connected to God, even though it is emanating all the way down into a human being, ad ha'avota, until it gets perverted, meaning until he sins. Ki az ha'avon koret beino leveina, then the sin cuts off or blocks between him and his nefesh, ad shuvo bis shuva, until he returns in repentance. V'alkein tikarei tshuva, that's why it calls it, indeed, repentance is called returning. Ki shava el dvekuso kemeaz, because it returns to, meaning the soul of a person returns to the cleaving of God like it was before. V'gam zehu, and that's why the Gemara says in Yuma, gedola tshuva shemegat ad kisei hakavod. Great is repentance, for it reaches up to the throne of glory. Kihu me'asher nifreda mikisei hakavod yashuv adav. That means because once it has been disconnected, meaning a sin has disconnected a person from the emanation of his soul, which reaches all the way to the kisei hakavod, so when he does tshuva, it's restored, and that's why Chazal say that it goes all the way to the kisei hakavod. And with this we can understand the terminology of exhalation, neficha, the breathing that was mentioned in regards to HaKadosh Baruch Hu granting a neshama to Adam. V'hu, and that is, ki kasher anofech b'kli zchuchit, when somebody blows into in the act of creating a glass vessel, haruach asher b'toch piv, the breath which is within his mouth, tveka im asher toch hakli, it cleaves or becomes one with the air that is already in the vessel. Meaning the breath is emitted and goes into the vessel, and the vessel becomes open, and the breath which is within his mouth cleaves with that which is the inside of the vessel. So too, when the Blessed One grants or places a soul into Adam, the portion which was received, which was entrusted and placed within the Adam, it is still bound with what is within God, so to speak. However, there's a distinction, there's a difference between this allegory, this idea of a human being breathing into a glass vessel and God breathing in the soul. In regards to the breath, the exhalation of flesh and blood, when it's used to create a vessel, at some point there is a break, there is a separation in the connection between that which is inside the human being and that which has entered the vessel. right? It's a transference. He exhales and it goes into the vessel, but it doesn't remain a living connection. Ki chomerhu, right? It's matter. Ach nefichato yitbarach. However, regarding the breath of God, lochen, this is not so. Ki im sheruach nefichato hamekasheret omedet la'ad. That exhalation, that breath that he has invested with his exhalation, it is bound forever. V'zeh inyan hakal v'chomer asher amar Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta, and this is really the content of the lesson that Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta taught in the Midrash. Okay, so let's pause for a second. So we said that we want to use the idea of somebody who's fashioning a glass vessel as a mashal for understanding the neficha here, and we're saying that there's some sort of, on the one hand, on the level of the mashal, there is a receiving in the vessel of air that came out of the maker. However, there's a huge difference, we want to say, between what actually happened by Adam HaRishon and in this mashal, because by Adam HaRishon, right, we're taking for granted that anything that emanates from God is still a living connection, and therefore, it's what's entrusted in Adam is cleaving to still its source. Okay? Now, we're about to mention a midrash. The midrash appears in several places, and basically the story is like this. There was a gentleman that lost his son, and he was mitabel, he was mourning, and Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta went to visit him, and over the course of the conversation, when Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta tried to console him, the topic of Tchiyat HaMetim came up, the resurrection of the dead, and this person who he was, who Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta was consoling, happened to be a heretic, and he questioned the idea of Tchiyat HaMetim, and Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta kind of answered him back with this mashal. So let's see the story. There was a kal v'chomer that Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta made. The kal v'chomer is, I believe in Latin, it's an a fiorti. We use it in the Shloshes Midos Shator Nedrash Ben, but it means that it's a logical argument that if you can say with certainty about a fact, about something, that you can say a fact or a certainty with certainty about a situation, then certainly you can apply that to another situation which would seem even more extreme in the same criteria. Let's explain. Okay, so here's the story. Bereshit Alsheich. So this particular person that Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta was consoling, he argued against the resurrection. V'amar, and he said, when I say that, I mean the resurrection of the dead. Okay, Alsheich v'amar, it chas ben medabkin? Could it be that these disparate elements, these shards, can be reunited? Meaning, when a person expires, he has his soul, and it separates from his body, and it seems like it's a foregone conclusion that it's terminal. These pieces cannot be recombined. So he challenged, and he said, "Can these shards be stuck together again?" Lo kach ktiv, doesn't the verse in Tehillim say, "Kichli yotzer tinapsem," like the vessel of a potter, he will shatter, meaning God will deal a blow that doesn't just destroy a vessel, but it shatters the pieces. How can the pieces be put back together? Amar lo, so Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta answered him, Kli cheres, when it comes to a vessel made out of clay, earthenware, biryato min hamayim, its creation is with water. V'hechshero, meaning you take earth and what do? You have to knead it with water. You make a shape, and then v'hechshero ba'or, and you put it in an oven. You use heat, you use fire to really make it. Kli zchuchit, when it comes to a glass vessel, biryato min ha'or, it's made with fire. V'hechshero ba'or, and it's finished. It's sealed with fire. Ze nishbar v'yesh lo takana, v'ze nishbar ve'en lo takana. Regarding a glass vessel that breaks, that shatters, one can reconstitute the pieces. You can melt it down and reform it again. However, with earthenware, you can't do that. You can't fix it. Amar lo, So Rabbi Yossi, ben Chala, so the man that he was consoling said to him, well, certainly, ayideshu hu asui b'neficha, because it's made with breath. Amar lo, so Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta said back to him, Yishma'u aznecha ma shepicha medaber. Your ears should hear what your own mouth is saying. Umayim zeh she'asui b'nefichato shel basar v'dam. What, right? Just like regarding the exhalation of a human being. Yesh lo takana, the human being's exhalation was used to make a vessel, and if that vessel breaks, it can be fixed. B'nefichato shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, something fashioned with the exhalation of the Holy One, blessed be He, ala achat kama v'kama, certainly so. That's the esoteric discussion. Okay, you can ask a lot of questions on this. I have unresolved questions on this, but that's the Midrash. The Midrash says that Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta basically proved to this person that since just like, for some reason, the critical variable here is that it was made with exhalation, but the fact that a glass vessel can be reconstituted and it's only made by a human being, so certainly a human being whose soul was invested by the Creator's exhalation can certainly be reunited, can certainly be fixed. Okay. Amnam. However, Hine Rabbi Yossi, Leman Yavo Lechalek Be'inyan Haneficha, Heir Lo Ozen B'Sheilahi. In order to show him the distinction of exhalation, of breath, he raised for him in his ear this question. How is it that a glass vessel, which is made with just one yesod, its material is made out of, is fashioned by one element, right? That can be fixed. As opposed to a earthenware vessel, which is made with two elements. Meaning, the earthenware vessel is made out of water and heat, whereas in the description of the Midrash, the glass is only made out of heat. And you would think, for some reason, that something that's shattered, that's made out of only one element, if you can shatter that one element, you know how you're going to put it together. But if something is made out of two elements, if you separate those two elements, at least you can put those elements are whole in themselves, you can put them back together. So you would think that it should be reversed. Okay? V'haya ro'u yisapech. In the mashal, it should have been reversed. V'hi lochen, כי על ידי אמרו החילוק שחילק על הנפיחה, ואמר כי יסוד הרוח אשר בנפיחת האדם, שבא מכוח ארבע יסודות שבו, היה לו עזר לקבל תיקון וקיום. So he says that basically the inhalation, the exhalation of God's neficha into Adam, as we explained before, was the aggregate of all the different worlds that God invested in him. And therefore, there was, through that neficha, that ruach, he was aided in being able to receive tikkun, rectification. Okay, as heshivlo, so then he was answered, etc. Lomar, to say, im nefichat ma sheba mikoch adam, she'achar histalek hakli, kvar nifsak hashaychut asher leruach adam im hakli, she'ein achibor rak be'et haneficha, מספיק לתת בו תיקון וקיום, נפיחתו של הקדוש ברוך הוא, שזולת היותו מדבר הבלתי נפסד, כי הוא המחיה את הכל, גם בלתי נפסקת, כדרך כל דבר רוחני, שמתרבה ומתפשט, ואינו נפסק ונעתק על אחת כמה וכמה. So the response was like this. By the exhalation of a human being, even after there's a separation, it is not, we said before that the difference between a human being's breath into a vessel and God's breath is that God's breath is a living connection. And by the glassware, the connection is broken. And yet still it can be fixed. So certainly, a human being who is constantly receiving that exhalation from God, right? Because if it was not for that, he would totally expire, because that's what sustains all, right? And it can never really, meaning there's a level of vitality that's constantly being received from God, just like everything spiritual which emanates, kederech kol davar ruchani, shemit rabed, that it multiplies and mitbashet and spreads forward, ve'enu nifsak, and it never ceases, v'netak, and is uprooted, alachat kama v'kama. So you see that if man's receiving of the exhalation of God is a living connection, so certainly he can enjoy the benefit of the rectification that is experienced in a glassware vessel, which it ceased to receive at some point the exhalation of its maker. Okay. Okay, so unfortunately we have to stop prematurely here. So till next time.